Less than 10 minutes by bus from the stop Stazione Roma Nord near Porta Fiorentina is all it takes to get to Bagnaia from Viterbo. Once there, it's a short walk up Via Jacopo Barozzi to where I was going, one of the main reasons I had decided to come to Viterbo, Villa Lante. After I'd got my ticket, I paused by the Fontana del Pegaso, Pegasus Fountain, then started a long walk through the monumental park before visiting the famous garden. So join me for my morning's visit to the amazing and gorgeous garden and park of Villa Lante. Both the park, which was originally a hunting preserve, and the elaborate garden were laid out under the auspices of Cardinal Francesco Gambara, who had just been named Cardinal of Viterbo in 1566. Immediately after becoming cardinal, he set about realizing the Giardino all'Italiana, Italian garden, and the adjacent grounds, which are much less elaborate, albeit planned with equal intention. I walked up the main path into the wooded area, arriving at the Fountain of the Beaver, named for the sculpture in the middle of the fountain, too small to see clearly here. Not too far away is the huge Conservone, the water tank which functions as a water reserve for all the fountains which receive their water from this tank, set at the highest point of the park, via gravity. Although it hadn't rained for days, some of the trails in the woods were still distinctly muddy as I continued back down on a different path. It was somewhere near the Fountain of the Little Lions and the Rowan that I encountered the sole other visitor up in this area of the park. Back down by the entrance, I paused by the Fountain of the Acorns, now missing its original 9 water jets in the shape of acorns from the initial plan. As one of the twin houses, called Palazzine, was about to open, I moved over to the formal garden. The street leading to Villa Lante is named for its architect, Jacopo Barozzi da Vignola, but the hydraulic architect who planned the fountains in the garden was Tommaso Ghinucci, brought in by the former from Siena. With its incredibly ornate layout of descending fountains, the garden was intended to be on a par with the famous contemporary garden architectures of Villa d'Este in Tivoli or the Palazzo Farnese in Caprarola. More on the garden in just a minute. The twin palazzine, which mirror each other, are named for the 2 cardinals who collaborated on the construction of Villa Lante, Cardinal Gambara and Cardinal Montalto. The Palazzina Montalto is open to the public. In the Salone della Conversazione, the conversation chamber, of the Palazzina Montalto, I got a sore neck craning up at the ceiling artwork portraying female divinities and nymphs. But I preferred the frieze, with its heraldic features, and the lions whose paws seemed to step over the balustrade. Now back to the garden. We're at the second of 4 terraces here, next to the Nymphaeum of Neptune. The limestone wall covering gives the semblance of a marine cave, even if water no longer flows from Neptune's trident. Proceeding upwards along the central axis from the Fountain of Lights, with its 70 spouts resembling candle flickers, one comes to the Mensa del Cardinale, Cardinal's table, on the 3rd terrace. It was presumably used to keep platters of food, as well as beverages, cool during banquets for guests. I can imagine how many servants were required to do the serving, not to mention shading the cardinals or holding lighted torches aloft while they dined. I doubt whether the cardinals and their guests fancied a self-service buffet. This gardener was fishing out fallen leaves, which risked clogging the spout at the front. At the back of this terrace is the Fountain of the Giants, with these 2 figures representing the rivers Arno and Tiber. Notice the crayfish claws, heraldic symbol of Cardinal Gambara, at the top of the fountain. Between the third and fourth terraces flows the chain of water, here seen from above, because I would have been filming straight into the sun from the bottom end. At the front of the top terrace is the Fountain of the Dolphins, which is what the marine fantasy creatures were called. Again, it was virtually impossible to find an angle from the front not blinded by the sun. At the top end, on the right, is the loggia of the Muses, only two of whom are still visible, namely Erato and Terpsichore. And finally, at the back of the top terrace, the last fountain, or initial one, considering that the water flows downwards from here to all the others. The Fontana del Diluvio, or Fountain of the Downpour or Deluge, with an imitation of caves from which the source of water originates. I enjoyed the sign warning about the danger of water for those who might mistake the green moss for a carpet. I couldn't find any indication for who this four-faced creature represented just in front of the fountain, but I liked the facial expression of amazement. Back on the second level by the Fountain of Lights and the Twin Palaces, a view down to the most formal garden on the first terrace, the geometrically arranged Giardino Quadrato, consisting of 12 squares. I loved the topiary, whether in the shade or the sun, surrounding the central fountain and pool. Between the four statues at the top of this fountain, the Fontana dei Mori, are 5 dangling pears, a symbol of Cardinal Peretti Montalto, Peretti meaning little pears. Figures in boats below the fountain also spout water into the pool. In the Loggia Montalto, I liked the aviary on the ceiling and the trompe-l'oeil extension of perspective at the end of the corridor. Its mirror opposite on the other side, the Loggia Gambara, completed some 40 years earlier, features a painting on one side wall representing the original design of Villa Lante. Back outside by the Pegasus fountain, it was time to conclude my visit to this wonderful late Renaissance example of Italian villa architecture and formal garden planning. It was easy to see why it was voted Italy's most beautiful garden in 2011. And by the way, during the several hours I spent there, I saw a maximum of 20 other visitors.